and we're very glad to have him. And he will read the Sacred Hoop by Black Elk.
Thank you, Dolly. The Sacred Hoop. Then I was standing on the highest mountain of them all, and around beneath me was the whole hoop of the world. And I stood there, and I saw more than I can tell, and I understood more than I saw. For I was seeing in the sacred manner the shape of all things of the Spirit, in the shapes as they must live together like one being. And I saw that the sacred hoop of my people was of many hoops that make one circle, wide as daylight and starlight. In the center grew one flowering tree to shelter all the children of one mother and one father. And I saw that it was holy. Black Elk. Okay. Good morning. My name is John Tibbetts, and I am the Assistant Director at the Atwood Museum, home of the Chatham Historical Society. And I am honored to be here today and would like to thank Lori Noble for inviting me to speak. I am energized by my new role with the museum. During the hiring process, I highlighted my approach and perspective on how to engage with history. I believe the past informs our present and determines our future. I want history to be accessible and inclusive. To do so, I often have to ask, whose story has already been told and whose story hasn't been told yet? I want an audience to imagine what it was like to live in another time and place and discover the similarities and differences to their contemporary situation. For our situations are temporary, but our humanity is eternal. This summer, I witnessed several aha moments from patrons. One example I remember was the astonishment one visitor had when he learned that there were 2 federally recognized Native American tribes on the Cape and Islands. His comment, "I thought there weren't any left," prompted me to explain the over 10,000-year history of the Wampanoag, the people of the first light. They have always been here and are still. As I witnessed his paradigm shift, he was grateful for learning more about them. The Wetu, built by members of the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe on the museum grounds, has ignited many conversations like this and is a major talking point with docents and guests. This acknowledgement of the original inhabitants of the land on which we stand is vital to the future of the museum and our community. The Atwood Museum and the Chatham Historical Society's history runs parallel to many other museums across the country. American museums grew out of private collections in the late 18th century with the need to preserve the history of the emerging nation. Many of these museums began in private homes, inns, and taverns who believed they could lay claim to George Washington slept here. By the 1840s, 2 types of museums emerged with 2 very different approaches: entertainment versus education. P.T. Barnum's American Museum, yes, a Barnum and Bailey circus, was a funhouse approach to exhibiting collections. His mix of entertainment with natural discoveries drew millions to New York City and helped solidify American popular culture through performances, lectures, and exhibits. But his manipulation of the facts and fiction raised questions in his approach and practices. For example, having performers dress up as mermaids could only get you so many oohs and ahs for so long. On the other end of the spectrum was the creation of the Smithsonian Institution, based on ongoing scholarship, exploration, and diffuse knowledge to the nation. The Smithsonian example prevailed as the type of museum Americans came to expect. But now, an audience wants both, to be entertained while engaging with knowledge. Captain Joseph Atwood built his mansion house in 1752 after acquiring wealth commanding trading vessels. He was a respected member of the community, most likely due to the fact by the 1760s he was one of the largest landowners in Chatham. In 1772, Captain Atwood was on the Committee of Correspondence to report with another committee in Boston to protest against the unjust taxation by the British Parliament. Yes, the Atwoods were on hand to help bring democracy to Chatham. In 1923, the 20th century began to soak into Chatham. The automobile traffic increased, grand hotels and resorts grew in popularity, as did the idea of summer homes. A group of women from the Ladies' Reading Club grew anxious of the influx of people coming to town and worried that old homes like the Atwood House would become beach cottages and lose their history. And this is still happening today. From 1923 to 1926, the Historical Society was formed and met in various spaces around town until they found their cause d'etre. A successful campaign rallied the community together and was able to raise $5,000 in 1 month in the summer of 1926. Two of the women, Alice Guild and Dr. Minnie Buck, helped with these efforts. And when the heirs to the Atwood House, who none lived in Massachusetts any longer, were approached by the Historical Society to purchase the home, Alice and Minnie were ready to roll up their sleeves and get to work, scrubbing floors, pulling out overgrowth. In fact, a tree was growing in the middle of the hearth of the home, replastered the walls. They were able to bring the house back to life in time to open as a museum in the summer of 1927. The house, a prime example of mid-18th century colonial architecture, reflects the staunch Yankee character of its original inhabitants. Its low profile, gambrel roof, gray shingles stand as a testament to the perseverance of Cape Codders. We all are indebted to these women and all who helped them, for they had the foresight of thinking of the future by preserving the past. As the Atwood Museum prepares to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the Historical Society, we are pulling together exhibits that will reflect this history. This is no small feat. Many minds and hands will come together to embrace the 21st century and grow our audience. During this process, I ask questions like, how can we present history to the most broad spectrum of people? What steps can we take to include everyone? I bring these questions to meetings and plans for exhibits, programs, and education. Boiled down to this, how is our presentation of history inclusive? Museums are big business in America, with over 17,000 across the nation, with a yearly attendance around 8 million visitors. Museums in the 21st century face many challenges beyond health and safety measures needed to combat COVID. Recent labor movements have swept the grand halls of major institutions, holding administrations accountable for the diversity and inclusion statements, hiring processes, and representation of marginalized voices. Museum professionals are questioning everything. This landscape is hard to interpret from the outside, but having worked in museums for over 6 years, I can see the various perspectives. Some claim death to the museum, as they are strongholds of privilege and elitism, while others continue to support their institution's mission by infusing equitable practices to help slowly change the culture. This reckoning in American museums is simultaneous with the examination of culture and history. It's easy to get wrapped up in the culture wars and take strong stances for or against certain ideas and theories. As a museum professional, I feel it's my responsibility to hear all sides and make good judgment on what needs to change and what needs to be preserved. I want our audience to be both entertained and diffused with knowledge. This is how institutions will remain relevant in the 21st century. The Atwood Museum is made up of almost 300 years of individuals' contributions to this community. Members of the Atwood family placed high importance on civil engagement and responsibility. The last full-time resident of the house, Marjorie Atwood, was a forthright woman. She often stood up at town hall meetings to speak her mind on the behalf of her community. As the eldest citizen, she felt she had the right to do so. In the 1870s, it was not common for women to do this, but Marjorie spoke and was respected. The conviction of Marjorie, the work of the founding ladies, set forth 100 years of volunteers and staff dedicating their time and passion to maintaining the museum as an engaging center for local history and culture. I am honored to now be part of this rich history. As I learn more and more about the history of Chatham, the sense of community is constant. The paintings of Alice Stalnick solidify for many and for myself the importance of connection in a small New England town. As I stand here today, I affirm my commitment to those who came before me and all who will come after. For I do believe museums are the memory of mankind. Thank you.